All right, hello folks. Welcome. We are going to be talking today about editing, shading, lighting, and contrast in our images. So where we had last left off on our great adventure, we had discussed last week about how we can edit color using a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And so as we discussed though, color has three primary factors: the hue and the saturation, but also the brightness or the value. Now on the hue sat adjustment layer, there is a way to adjust the value, but as most of you saw if you tried to mess with it, is that the brightness control is not exactly or the value control on there is not exactly what you would hope for, since it sort of just blows the image or the color out to like white or darkens it down to black. It doesn't actually control in any subtle way the actual shading. So when you want to make shading changes, we use a different adjustment layer. We use the levels adjustment layer. So let's start by talking about these two tools at the top though. So if you needed to make spot corrections to the shading on an image, you can use what's known as the burn tool and the dodge tool on that picture. So if I'm on here and I hit O, you'll find burn and dodge right here. And so the dodge tool will dodge light from burning the image, which we'll talk about what that means in a second, which means that it will lighten your image. So if I paint with the dodge tool on Dr. Fauci's face, you can see how he's getting brighter and brighter. If I keep going, he will get very, very, very white. So that is the dodge tool. The dodge tool will lighten the image. By contrast, the burn tool will darken the image. Oh, whoops, I'm on the Salk layer. So now you can see if I paint on Dr. Fauci's face, he gets very, very dark. So certain things will persist, like the sharp highlights on his glasses, but other things will, of course, darken or get burned by the tool. So how does this happen? Or why does it work, basically? So let's hop down and take a look at this down here about burn and dodge and photography. So I'll read this very briefly and then I'll show you it in practice. So burn and dodge come to us from original photography in the way that we make photos from a film negative. So film photos created by pushing light or exposing light through the negative. If exposed to more light, the photo paper would react and burn the paper, quote unquote, and make it darker because it is light sensitive paper. If there was less light that was exposed to the paper, it would be left underdeveloped and therefore the paper would remain white. It would not be burned by the light because it is not being exposed to light. So therefore it'll become brighter by being more white. So that's how that works. Now, to show that in more in-depth practice so you can sort of understand what all of that meant, here is an example of a film negative, which I'm not certain that most of you have actually physically seen in your hands. Who has physically touched a film negative? That's about what I thought. Yeah. So, unlucky, I guess. But film, so when you use your phone, right, and all digital cameras, it is the same principle as original film photography. Your camera aperture opens for the smallest fraction of a second, 1/500th, 1/1000th of a second. And what that does is, in that period of time, the sensor will open up and be exposed to light. And then based on what we had talked about last week about light temperature, it's going to that sensor will read a beam of light hitting it, measure that wavelength of light, and fire that pixel of color. And then, the sensor absorbs all of that, makes your picture, your digital picture, fires a bunch of pixels. Well, with film, it's very much a similar concept. You open up the aperture, and instead of it being a sensor for pixels, it's a piece of film. So, but with the film, it is a two-stage process. So, I am standing here in front of the wall like this, right? And let's assume that there's no pictures on my wall for this example. So, nice tan wall, yay. So, I'm standing here, wall behind me is very bright. The light around us, so we take the picture, boom, camera's back there. Well, what the camera sees is the light bouncing off the wall bounce into the camera. So the wall burns the film, right? The light bouncing off the wall burns the wall, or the film, making the wall look very, or light, rather. This isn't going to work as an example, because, let's see. Let me adjust my example. Okay, so I will block the light, basically, is what's going to happen when it goes back. So there will be this big light area where I am. The wall will be all burned because it's very light, right? So the wall will look dark on the negative. I will look very light. So that's what's going on here. You can see the picture of the cabin. So those dark windows, they look very light. The lightish wood and the woods around it, they look very dark on there because the light is able to hit the photosensitive paper and burn it. So then we reverse the image. That's why it's called a negative. So quite simply, now we have that negative, and then you make your picture by taking your photo bed. Boom, here's your, let me make this a little better. Boom. This is what's called an enlarger. And it's just a big light that hangs over your photo paper, and you put your negative in here, and then it literally enlarges it by projecting it down onto the paper. So thinking about our negative, what is light will become dark, right, in the negative, and the dark will become light because we're firing light through what the camera could and could not see. So then it gets back to where I am going to be all light and the wall is going to be very dark. Then my light wall will receive very little light from the negative because on the negative it's very dark. So that will stop the light from coming through, which means that the photo paper underneath will remain white. I say all of that to basically point out that this stuff predates even Photoshop. The stuff is things that persisted from back in the day. So when I took photo in 2006, is that right? 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 6. I had darkroom photography, and we had to physically do what we just talked about, using photo paper that is light sensitive and this and that. So if I wanted to burn or dodge something, I would say that same example, me standing against a wall. Well, say I needed to burn me, right? I needed to put more darkness on me. I needed to bring in more detail. But I don't need that to happen to the wall. So what I need to do is I project that picture, right? I make a copy of it. And then I take my X-Acto knife, cut out the area that I want to burn so that more light will hit it, and then I remake that photo again. First I do it to the original lighting level, then put my mask over it that I have cut with an X-Acto knife, and then project it again. So masking and burn and dodge all are real things that I had to do. So now you get to do them in Photoshop. I'm sure you would all much rather be able to make your masks with the pen tool than an actual X-Acto knife, because for anyone who's had to use an X-Acto knife, they are not as exacting as you would like them to be. So anyway, that brings us to the meat and potatoes of today. So the burn and dodge tool are your spot changes. So these should be your last tools that you use, unless that's all you need, then fair enough. But mostly you'll start by adjusting the general contrast of the image using the levels, and then you'll go in as needed and burn and dodge after that, right? So levels is your macro level change to the shading, to the lighting and contrast. In the same way that our HueSat from last week was a macro level change of the entire color and saturation. So similarly, it's an adjustment layer, so it can be masked, as we know. It can, you can turn it on and off as a layer, as you know, and move it in the layer stack. But today, we're going to find out what happens if the layer stack is not enough and a mask is not enough to corral the layer to only affect the specific parts of the image that you want. So what we're going to learn about today is using the levels and also using clipping masks in conjunction with adjustment layers, because you'll be doing it with HueSat starting tomorrow too. But clipping masks basically just is, if I wish I had a paper clip on my desk, but it is essentially just like paper clipping two things together. So like I got your seating chart, and I would clipping mask these together so that these always stayed together, right? Same concept. When I make my levels in here, so adjustments, it's going to be the second icon in the first row. Make a levels. So the first thing you'll notice is that if I adjust this, it's going to adjust both layers because it's adjusting everything in the layer stack beneath it. Well, I can't necessarily move this above this to get this out of the layer stack so it only affects Dr. Fauci. So I need to just make it only affect Dr. Fauci. So I'm going to leave this effect kind of screwed up so you can tell, because it shouldn't be this dark, right? But if you just right click on the word levels here, you'll see in your menu is the option for create clipping mask. And so when you create a clipping mask, you will see the little baby arrow pointing down and say, this one right here, boss. So that's where levels is going to work, only on Dr. Fauci. So now whatever changes I make only affect that layer. So if I unclip it, you'll see it goes back to affecting everything beneath it in the layers stack. And before someone asks this question, they also stack upon themselves, right? So there's a HueSat. There's nothing changed in the HueSat, but you can see both of these are clipped. Both of these would only affect Dr. Fauci. But if there were things that affected these nested layers in between, like if something on this levels changed this HueSat would quote unquote see it because the layer stack still does operate down. So that's that on that. So a clipping mask. What's locked? Why aren't you letting me get rid of this? Oh, there we go. So let me get rid of this. So now we're back at basics. So this is just fresh. All right. So levels. You folks, unlike my other class of students, know who this is. So here's Ms. Byrne. So with Ms. Byrne, you all know what Ms. Byrne looks like. So there you go. So this is a picture of Ms. Byrne that I've edited to make her a little bit more crispy. So what you are noticing, the first things first in the levels, is the histogram, which if I come back here, I will make another levels. So you can see how this histogram is different on this one as it is in here. And that's because this histogram represents Photoshop calculating, looking at the image and looking at the pixels. It can see this is the distribution of those pixels between black at 0 and white at 255, which let's not talk about why. So you have 0, 255, and then this little slider in the middle, which is set at 1, which means that that's 50% gray at the start, but it's like the ratio of this and that. The numbers don't matter so much. I get that question a lot. It's more about the actual sliders. And so looking at what I have marked out here, you'll see this little red area. And And so the histogram is the original image, and then the sliders are what I have adjusted. So what I have done here is moved pure black from here down to here. And so what that means is any pixels that originally were in this range, so basically like pure black to 20% gray, so fairly dark still, those are now pure black. Always will be pure black. And so my 50% gray is here. And so what that means is that these pixels that were originally, let's say, I don't know, 25% to 45% gray are now 0 to 50. So it recalculates how dark those pixels need to be. Same token on the other side. I have moved pure white to the left, which means that all of these tones that were 80 to 100% gray, so fairly light, very close to white, now they're all pure white. These are all pure white. And that means with 50% gray here, all of these tones, which you can see is a lot of them, need to be recalculated as to where they fall between white and 50% gray. And so what that has done is, whereas before she had some subtlety on her cheek where the sunlight was hitting her cheek, now you can see on her cheek it's very blown out. It is pure white in here. So these effects can be very strong, but we want to work with them in a subtle way. So very rarely do you see me going highway to the danger zone one way or the other. This looks very blown out and weird. This looks ominously dark. So we usually just tweak this and that. Okay, so let me see. Since I am recording this lecture, I didn't talk about it in my first period, but in case anyone comes back to look for this, one thing to note is that your burn and dodge tools are destructive. So if you, say, just took your brush tool right and you painted black on the layer with Dr. Fauci, that black would stay on that layer unless, you undid it or what have you. It's not on a separate layer, so you can't delete it. It's on that layer permanently. So we mostly all understand that at this point. So the same concept, the burn and dodge tool are a brush tool, but it's editing the picture directly on top of it. So if I do go in here and I start burning Dr. Fauci first, and then I do my levels and I clip them on there, well, the levels doesn't see anything. It doesn't see my original picture of Dr. Fauci. It sees my burned version. So all of my levels will be based off of what I've already done to him. So there is a way to separate these out if you wanted to have your burn and dodge happen on a separate layer. I'm going to show that. I don't really expect you folks to do it. What I would suggest is, if you find yourself practicing burn and dodge and you're not confident, you can always duplicate your layers and use the duplicate as opposed to the original. And then if you make a mistake here, right, oops, I made him very, very dark, you can just get rid of that one, bring back your original, right? So if you want to try a little bit more fancy way, you can make a new layer, and I will call this BD, so for burn dodge. And then I will go to Edit, Fill, and fill it directly with 50% gray. And you'll be like, okay, why, Mr. Meyer? So I'll show in a second. So I have this on 50% gray. Normal layer blending mode, I need to change to overlay. And now you'll see that it's basically gone away. And then now I can burn and dodge directly on this layer. And I can also turn it on and off. And I could delete it if I needed to. So the reason why that works is, as I said, the burn and dodge tool affects the image directly, right? So if I dodge, it dodges on the picture directly of Dr. Fauci. But here's me on my blank layer 1. Nothing happens, right? That's because the burn and dodge tool affects the pixels that are already there. So it brightens or darkens the pixels that are already there. So if I duplicated my Dr. Fauci layer, like I had mentioned a second ago, yes, I can burn and dodge directly on it because there's pixels there. There's colored pixels there, I should say. There are pixels here on my empty layer, but they don't have anything in them. They are empty pixels. So when I go to burn them, anything times 0 is 0. So there you have it. So I'm going to take a quick pause. Okay, so I am just resetting my document back to starts. So let's talk about the process today. So we got 2 layers in here. We have the layer of Dr. Fauci and the layer of Dr. Salk, and I've already lined up Dr. Fauci's face with Dr. Salk, so you don't need to move this layer. So the first thing that you would want to do to perform this face swap is make the mask. So I'm just going to make an empty mask on Dr. Fauci, and we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. So we've learned how to make some very customized masks if we wanted to, say, remove Dr. Fauci from his background, but we want to blend Dr. Fauci in to the background that is Dr. Salk. So I'm just going to use a larger brush, soft on the hardness, so low value on the hardness, and painting black on my mask. Again, just doing it the old-fashioned way. So I'm just make this a little bigger. So I'm going to just get the bulk of it out of the way. Boom. Okay. And over here. And I'll make my brush a little smaller. Okay. And so make it a little smaller now. And then I'm just going to touch up here on his neck. And then you can, you can cut off Dr. Fauci's ear because we'll use Dr. Salk's. Try and make sure you do keep the glasses there if you can, going back behind the ear. But then we are going to get rid of Dr. Fauci's hair. So again, I'm just painting black on my mask, the soft brush. Try and keep this over here as best I can. Want to keep the cheek as best we can. Okay. Alright, so there's our before, or I guess our Dr. Salk only, and then Dr. Fauci. And if you turn it on and off real quick, you'll be able to see, like, I missed a part of my mask over here. Not that you would have noticed, but you'll be able to see some of these things flickering. Okay, cool. So next course of action, now that we have the mask made, is that if you turn off Dr. Fauci, you will notice that Dr. Salk's face is rather light. And that's actually mostly a factor of the photography of the day, and the lighting that you needed to make photography work well back then. Basically, we need to make Dr. Fauci's face a lot lighter while still keeping it relatively gray. So let's start by adding our levels. So adjustments, levels, second one in the first row. And then, of course, as I had mentioned earlier, if we are just messing with this without clipping it, it will affect both doctors. So once you make your levels, you need to make sure you right-click on the word levels and duplicate, or not duplicate, I'm so dumb. You right-click and go down to create clipping mask. Boom. And then you'll see this little tiny arrow. And so that will show you that any changes you make are just going to affect Dr. Fauci. And so if I turn it up, you can see just how well I performed on my mask. It turned out all right. I guess I could touch up a little down here, but it's whatever. Okay, so now I have my levels. So let me pull this up over here so it's a little bit more easy to see out there for my people. I'm going to zoom in. This won't show up on the video, but my people in class will be able to see it a little better. So first thing I'm going to do is move my pure black closer to the edge of the histogram here, just for funsies. And I think I will adjust this in a minute, but I moved this white tab to like right here. And so you can see already the change that's had on my picture. So I have a significantly little brighter face overall. A little bit of the very dark parts of his eyes got darker. And then if I move my middle gray slider to the left slightly, you'll see how that blows out the middle grays there. And I'm going to just leave this exceptionally turned up for a second as I zoom out and turn off Dr. Fauci. So there's our baseline of Dr. Salk. So we can see here, I need to go back and bring this sort of like right here. Now what I had discovered in the first period is that my whites are too strong. My pure white is too strong on this, so then I have this in sort of a good spot, and then I can recalibrate my high end of my whites by moving my pure white tab back in the direction that it came from, and you can see how the pure white being here and just moving it back even a slight amount really helps balance out those tones a lot. So I can do that. What's your question?
So for the levels layer, how do you make it so that it's only for Antonio's face?
When you right click on the word levels for the levels layer, make sure you do create clipping mask. And then it should give you a little arrow. So for this, so the shading is pretty good. Let me go back to this. Let's see if I move pure black. Okay, if I move pure black in a little bit, that kind of helps a little bit. And let's see. There we go. Okay. So I moved my pure white sort of more back to where it came from, but that's okay. So now we got Dr. Fauci's face, and he's more muted in the face. So by moving pure black over a little bit, moving our 50% gray closer to our pure black. So that gives us that. And then for the final touches, I'm going to move properties back over here. For the final touches, I can grab my dodge tool and my burn tool and do some touch-ups for Dr. Fauci. Like I said, the effects of the levels will multiply this because it's looking at the layer underneath, so you don't need to do too much with this. So I'll just take my dodge tool and I'll brighten up sort of the bridge of his nose, round out his cheeks here a little bit around the laugh lines, and then see, even like this one looks like low-key a little strong. And then burn. So then I'll come in here, sort of touch up his eyebrows here, give him a little bit more form. Not like that. Let me burn his bottom lip a little bit, give him that stiff lip. And then, yeah, I guess that's about it. We can give him a little bit more color inside his eye sockets. So, and then there you got it. So if I zoom out, honestly, I probably should have been a little bit more subtle with my dodge tool. You can, one thing we didn't talk, you can turn down the exposure rating of the tools up here if you feel like you're getting too much out of your burn and dodge tools. They're too strong. So, but there we have it. So our before into our after. So the steps again, we first made our good mask for Dr. Fauci just using a soft brush. Then we added the levels, which we then created a clipping mask to clip to Dr. Fauci, adjusted the levels so that the 50% gray was a little closer to black, and therefore our grays, our middle grays, were a little bit more expanded on the lighter side, and then finalized with some touch-ups with burn and dodge on the Dr. Fauci. So thank you for watching.